President Trump reacting as violent protests rage on in parts of the country. A chaotic scene in Washington, D.C. last night as protesters burned the American flag just a few blocks from the White House. The president swiftly condemning the demonstration and saying it's a shame Congress doesn't act to stop the, quote, lowlifes who burn the flag. Protests also turning unruly at the Wisconsin state capitol, where a state senator says he was attacked for recording a video. Crowds there tearing down two statues, including one of a colonel who fought on the Union side of the Civil War. The president is expected to sign his executive order hiking penalties for destroying monuments this week. He had this to say last night.
The left-wing mob is trying to demolish our heritage so they can replace it with a new repressive regime that they alone control. They're tearing down statues, desecrating monuments, and purging dissenters. It's not the behavior of a peaceful political movement.
Pete, why do you tear down a statue in Wisconsin of a Union leader?
Because it's not about the Civil War. It's about that flag that was burned outside of the White House. It is about a burning hatred for America on behalf of the we're in a cultural civil war here. We're in the middle of a fracture. You have Marxists affiliated with Antifa and BLM, the Democrat Party completely enabling them. They start with the idea that it was the Civil War or Confederates. Now they're tearing down Grant. Now they're tearing down this colonel in Wisconsin. But it's not just that. They want to go after Lincoln, Washington, and now they're talking about Jesus Christ. I mean, but it's going to backlash back at them because, of course, as we've seen in social media and elsewhere, Yale University, named after a slave trader. What do you do? What does Yale do about that? What about New York City? The Duke of York himself, a slave trader centuries ago. Does everything get renamed? Does everything get torn down? This is 1984 laid bare in front of us. And I think President Trump recognizes that defending a simple love of America, defending 1776 against 1619 is still where most Americans are. You can recognize the sins of the past without tearing them down. You have to confront it. You can't let the mob take over. Otherwise, the mob erases history and writes their own.
You mentioned New York. The governor of New York had this to say about the movement. Let's listen.
I think it's a healthy expression of people saying, let's get some priorities here and let's remember the sin and mistake that this nation made, and let's not celebrate it.
Katie, what do you think about that?
I would just quote what Senator Tim Scott said yesterday, and that is, look, I'm not going to celebrate all of our history, but we can't just erase it. And in fact, keeping our history in plain view allows us to see the progress that we've made, to stand up against the type of oppression that we've seen in the past, and to move forward working together to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And I think it's really important to stop calling these people protesters. They are not. They are violent agitators who are burning down American history, damaging property that does not belong to them. They are setting fires in the streets of Washington, D.C. and vandalizing churches. This is something that is not a, quote, protest or people calmly and peacefully expressing their opinions and their voice. There are processes to do that when it comes to statues being taken down and renaming things like Yale University, for example. But these people are acting more like Che Guevara than they're acting like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that needs to be recognized. And I think the Department of Justice is paying very close attention when it comes to the laws that are being broken here and making sure that they hold these criminals accountable so that this stops in cities across the country.
Marie, I think one of the problems is there's so many different things going on here. You know, when you talk about the statue that's in front of the Museum of Natural History, it's actually the family of Theodore Roosevelt who wants it to come down, because when you look at it, it does make you uncomfortable, and they don't feel like it's a good reflection of their relative, and that's why they want that to come down. But when you look at it, seems indiscriminate then, when you look at all the things that are going on, you know, whether it is that you know, the captain or the general that fought on the Union side of the Army tearing down, of the Civil War, tearing down his statue. It doesn't make any sense when you lump that in, you know, with these other images. What are your thoughts?
I agree, Melissa. I think that tearing down statues of Ulysses S. Grant, for example, someone from my home state of Ohio who was instrumental in winning the Civil War for the Union, that's stupid and that should not happen. But I want to point out that a large, overwhelming majority of these protesters are peaceful. We certainly see outliers and agitators, but a majority are still peaceful. And the Democratic Party is supporting efforts to look at monuments and to have a process to decide whether they should stay up or be taken down. In Germany, they don't have statues of Nazis. And in Iraq, our own military tore down statues of Saddam Hussein. So I think in our country, having Confederate leaders not to learn about history, but to idolize them, to put them on a monument, to look up to them, I don't think that's appropriate for generals who fought against our country as traitors. There's a way to learn about history that doesn't involve putting them on a pedestal that every day you have to drive past to get to work. And that's the conversation Democrats want to have. We don't want to take down Grant statues. A lot of Democrats don't even want to take down Christopher Columbus statues. But the right wants to lump all of it in together to make it sound scary and dangerous. And quite frankly, it's just really not in most cases. And that's what the American people should be focused on, this bigger conversation that's really important.
The right's not doing it. They're tearing down both of them. But the right is not doing that. These rioters are the ones tearing down statues of abolitionists and defacing the Lincoln Memorial. I mean, that's not the right doing that.
Well, okay, so
Jillian, that's one or two people, and the right is making it seem like it's
we got to
all
go one at a
Democrats.
time, guys. We have to go one at a time. You can't just jump in. Jillian, let me ask you: if what Maria is saying is true, it is these radicals that are hijacking what it is that the left is trying to do. Then, and we are seeing when you see people getting beaten up, and you see all of these different scenes. Immediately you're taken away from the idea, that this was about something that made sense in the first place, and now it's just out of control like Seattle.
And the waters get very muddy, and it very quickly becomes very difficult to decipher what it is that the good, peaceful people on the ground protesting lawfully want. You put it very well, Melissa. I think I've now spent about 5 days on the ground with Black Lives Matter protesters covering the protests near the White House here in Washington. And the thing that really has crystallized for me observing all these people is that there are two distinct groups of people. During the daytime, you have what are mostly peaceful, lawful protesters in and around the White House. At night, you have these agitators, a completely different set of people that come in. I don't know where they come from, but they come into the area and they sort of take it over. They very quickly become very energized and things go south. This is the pattern we've seen over and over and over for over 2 weeks now. There are two realities on the ground when we talk about these protests.
Melissa, I've been on that riot line too with a riot shield, and I actually don't think they're all that much different. The ones who are peaceful, and they're peaceful, agree completely with the people that are tearing down the statues. They're just not tearing them down. To Katie's point, they are Che Guevara. They're Marxists. They hate America. That's their view. They're using this movement to advance it.
All right, a startling scene in Atlanta last night. Armed